All right, good morning. Welcome in. We are the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Your SEC Insider Hit this morning is brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your auto and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. Go local, go with the home team, and we are excited that it's SEC Tournament Week. It's the best league in the history of college basketball, and that's according to Jay Billis, who's an ACC guy. I don't know what in the hell Danny Cannell's doing out on Twitter trying to lobby for the ACC, but it's embarrassing as usual. But I guess Cannell, he's got his team. It's funny, his alma mater wants to leave the ACC, but he's out there waving the ACC flag, talking about how Duke is clearly the number one team. And then you look at Quad 1 wins, and you're like, Danny, what are you looking at, buddy? So we wanted to welcome in SEC basketball insider Blake Lovell, and he joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line, host at 16 Southeastern. And this guy's all over college hoops. He's a machine on Twitter. Blake, good morning. How are you, buddy?
Hey, doing well. Good to talk to you.
You already in Bridgestone Arena getting your ankles taped?
I'm getting camping out already, right? I'm the only one, but hey, I'm here, right?
All right, so who's your team?
Just being in Nashville, right? It's just, I've been here for forever, and so it's just like, being around Tennessee and Vanderbilt and all that, and having covered the league for a while, I feel like those are the fan bases I know the most. Family grew up big Vanderbilt fans.
Okay.
So that's kind of always been in the family. So,
can you believe that we're here with the teams in the league? I know you heard what Jay Billis said a month ago, and we all knew it. But, he's one of the dudes in college basketball. He was on, as you know, Krzyzewski's first Final Four team, and kind of the springboard to what they would do from there on out. But even having said all that, can you believe the depth as far as the talent on the floor and the talent in the coaching ranks in the SEC today?
Yeah, it's pretty wild, isn't it? Just kind of look at, we knew that, years ago, the late Mike Sly was, putting obviously more emphasis on trying to be better. And then, I think Greg Sankey's carried that over. And I think the league office has done a good job of setting the SEC up for success. But, as you know, it comes down to, do you have the coaches, do you have the players? And, really, that's what's happened. Just see kind of this era, I feel like, where, with certainly with NIL, the transfers, everything like that. It's a situation where the SEC is set up for success. It's just a matter of do you execute it to the point to where you can have that success. And I think, again, when you look at all the numbers this year, there's just no doubt. We've never seen a conference do what the SEC did, not just in non-conference play this year, but now, going throughout conference play, getting ready for the tournament. We've not seen a lot of teams like this in one conference. And so, it's become the best league in the country, and I think at this point, everybody's got to be asking themselves, how do you carry that over? And you know what that means too. Just from the football standpoint, once you have this kind of success, everybody is going to be saying, all right, well, why can't we do that? And then, at that point, you're going to see a lot more pressure put, I think, on coaches, and you have to put these rosters together to keep this thing going.
That's a great point. They already anteed up last year and the year before, but with the success this year, I can't imagine what the going rate's going to be, especially for the top 4 to 6 teams in the league. So having said that, is Auburn your clear-cut favorite as far as not just this week, but the team in the league? Or do you have another one that's played really well, that's trending, and you think that they're going to be even better than Auburn in March?
Yeah, listen, Auburn, unquestioned. There's just no doubt that Auburn has the best body of work throughout this entire season. No question about it. But it's like you have a team that's 27-4, and they've lost 2 games in a row. So it's like, we were like, okay, should we just completely panic? Should we overreact to that? I don't think so. I think, again, they were playing 2 teams that needed those games for different reasons. Auburn already locked up the regular season title and locked up a number 1 overall, or maybe a number 1 overall seed. I think they should be. I don't think Duke should be the number 1 overall seed no matter what they do in the ACC tournament. But I think, though, if you're saying, right now, who's the team that's playing the best? Well, to me, I think it's Florida. And I think, again, if you're looking at a team that you feel like is trending in that kind of direction to where you're just like, all right, give me one team right this second, it's hard not to pick Florida because, again, we've seen them beat Auburn for starters. Yes, they had that wild game a couple weeks ago where they got down 26 in the first half at Georgia. But really, other than that, I mean, look at what they've done. And I know people point at the quad one difference and all that. And sure, I mean, they haven't played the same amount of quad one games and all that kind of stuff, but they're a top 10 offensive team, top 10 defensive team. And when you look at all the things they do well, they've got a 9-man rotation to me that I'm just like, give me those 9 against anybody in the country, Duke included. I don't care. I think they're good enough to beat anybody. And so it may be hard not to pick Florida right now, even though, like I said, if you're looking at it based on this entire season, sure, there's no question that Auburn has achieved sort of unprecedented things, but I think Florida may be the team to beat right now.
Do you think the committee will focus on quad one, or is it something else? Like, what do you think the number one thing is that the committee will look at?
Well, I'll tell you that the combination of things, I think, is what's going to really help the SEC specifically this year, and what I think will wind up helping Auburn in getting that number one overall seed. It's the fact that not only do you have a lot of these quad one wins, right? I mean, Auburn has 16. The next closest, Michigan State, has 12. Alabama, 11. Kentucky, 10. Tennessee, 10, and so forth. Florida's got 9. What the SEC managed to accomplish, we talked a minute ago about the non-conference. It wasn't just that they went 185 and 23, whatever the number wound up being. They didn't have any of those bad losses except for one, and that was the opening night of the season. South Carolina lost at home to North Florida. No other loss that any SEC team had taken in non-conference play was considered a bad loss. And then guess what? So no one took a bad loss in conference play either. Now, we could say from an eye test standpoint, all right, hey, Arkansas getting down 35 at South Carolina the other day, well, that's not great. But if you're just looking at it within the full body of work, right, that's not a bad loss this year. Whereas, in previous years, you lose to the bottom team in the SEC, well, they're probably 150 or 200 or something like that in all these, metrics and net rankings and everything. Okay, South Carolina's in the top 90. And so I think from that standpoint, that's what's going to work for the SEC when it comes to the committee, is that anytime you have a situation where you have, let's say, a bad loss, you can make up for it with a great win. And what the SEC has managed to do is that they don't really have any bad losses, and they got a lot of great wins. So to me, you stack that on top of each other. I just think, the SEC teams, I'm not just saying this as the SEC guy, anybody that has the sort of resume that these teams have, they should be getting the benefit of the doubt over the ACC teams, Mountain West teams and all this, because I just think, how can you necessarily just knock these teams when they played in what is, again, as we said earlier, a historical conference based on, achievements this year?
Yeah. Were you surprised, Billis? We're visiting with Blake Lovell, SEC basketball insider. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. We're talking SEC hoops. Unprecedented what has happened this year, and kind of where we're going with SEC basketball. Follow Blake on Twitter. A great follow as far as hoops at the Blake Lovell, and he joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Were you surprised Billis came out and said what he said when he did it?
I mean, I'm not going to lie. We were kind of saying those things probably a week or two before, in that we're saying, listen, if we project ahead and you're starting to wonder, okay, what's this going to look like? If you were seeing sort of the numbers sitting there like, all right, well, this really has a chance to be sitting there with the SEC saying these kind of things. Because, you could have looked at the Ken Pom numbers and all that, the ACC. It's the first year, Ken Pom came into effect and all that. It was 96, 97. The ACC, that was kind of the conference that everybody had been chasing in terms of that overall, net rank or net rating, however Ken Pom does all the advanced metrics. I'm not the best at that. But, when you look at it from that standpoint, the SEC has sort of lapped them almost by a full point, which is a lot when you consider these kind of things. And so from that, I mean, again, it always seemed like, when you were seeing the way this set up, and that's why I think I always go back to, sometimes we do this where we only focus on what's happening now, right? It's the recency bias. But, kind of as we talked about, you could have looked at this after the non-conference and said, there's no way that this is not going to wind up being the best conference ever when you look at it from a strength standpoint, because all these teams are just going to play each other now. It really goes back to what they did in the non-conference. And again, that's where I'm like 185-23. Like, look at anybody else out there. And it's also why I know everybody thinks I'm just dogging on the ACC this year, but the ACC,
it's okay. Go ahead. You have the floor. You can.
Yes, I feel like you would be okay with that, and many others probably here. But it's historically bad. Like, the SEC is historically great. The ACC is historically bad this year. And so there is no argument you can make. Like I said, even if you're an ACC guy, right? And that's like, yes, Jay Billis is a Duke guy, but there is not a single argument you can make that the ACC is anywhere close within the same stratosphere as the SEC in basketball right now. And you know what, too, I think is interesting about this, and this ties into the SEC conversation. But if you saw out there, it was either last week or the week before, a lot of these ACC schools who had bad seasons, decided to make the commitment to their coaches and say, we're bringing these guys back. And we know why that is, because you're going to see this a lot more, I think, now, where even if you're the ACC and you're like, hey, this conference, something's got to change, you're going to see these schools bring a lot of these coaches back because there's a lot of money invested. But it's also trying to say, all right, we're going to give you another shot because we think we can pump the money into this thing that can make it work, right? We're going to give you all the resources. We're really going to commit to it this year and all that. Well, guess what? They should have thought about that years ago, because that's what the SEC has done. They knew early on, you have to put something into this if you're going to get it out of it the way that they have this year, and they're reaping the benefits of it now, whereas a lot of these other conferences are almost feeling like they're trying to catch up. Not a lot of others. Big Ten's doing fine. Big 12's doing fine.
Right.
But I do think from an ACC standpoint, right, look yesterday, Kevin Keats, NC State, got into the Final Four last year. His statement he released yesterday, it was something about when the school commits to invest the resources, it's going to be a great program. And so that just shows you.
What do you think the going rate is or will be for this next cycle?
Oh boy. You're asking the wrong guy on that. Like $7+ million
numbers.
Probably. Okay. I think that's probably about right. Okay. Just because, again, right, we know the numbers and how ridiculous they are out there right now. And so I would guess it's probably something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Blake Lovell, straight out of Nashville. He's our SEC basketball tournament correspondent too. Great on Twitter, covering the league. Loves it, knows what's going on. And the ACC has one team in the top 21 in the NCAA net rankings. One team.
Yeah.
And the SEC has 4 in the top 6. So I don't know what Danny Cannell's taking, but somebody needs to watch him this week, and especially on Sunday when Selection Sunday rolls out. We're here in Mississippi, and Ole Miss and Mississippi State had good years, but overshadowed because there's so much star power in the league. Ole Miss finishes 8th, Mississippi State finishes 10th. They're going to the tournament. Blake, I still believe that they're dangerous, and if they get the right draw, they could win a game or two or maybe really get hot in the NCAA tournament. When you look at what Jans and Beard have done, what do you see?
Yeah, I agree with you, and we feel like sometimes we say that in the SEC where it's like, well, just let these teams get away from each other and they're going to be okay. But it's like that has to apply this year, right? Because we talked about the strength of the league. I think you are going to see some of these teams like this, where we've seen them hit some rough patches down the stretch, and you're like, okay, well, do we need to completely rethink our idea of what they can be? I don't know about that just yet, because I do feel like they both have different sort of approaches that can help them be successful, right? The one thing I feel like I've talked about with Ole Miss all season long is that, for starters, they're one of the most experienced teams in the country. We know what experience is doing for teams in the NCAA tournament, at least the past couple of years. They don't beat themselves. They're great at not turning the ball over, and they're great at turning over the other team. And I think when you look at some of those teams that have that kind of success, you got old guards that take care of the ball, and they're able to turn defense into offense. That's a lot of what Ole Miss does. And I think from that standpoint, that gives them an opportunity to be very successful. I mean, we're talking about a top 30 team offensively and defensively. And yes, they have 10 losses, but again, we have to put it within the context of where those losses came and who they came to. And I think they're going to be, one that I was saying probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, I'm like, hey, don't be surprised if Ole Miss is kind of one of those teams that winds up in the Elite Eight because they have sort of the makeup of the teams that can do that just with all those things I just mentioned. And Mississippi State, I mean, I said to someone last week, they're probably the most confusing team in the SEC just because, man, you see how good they can be, and then you see some of those stretches where they just are really struggling. And, I mean, I feel like that Arkansas game was the perfect example where, all right, looks like you're going to lose, you make the valiant comeback, then, wind up losing. Like, just lots of sort of roller coaster type emotions, I feel like, with this team over the past little bit. But, listen, anytime you have a player like Josh Hubbard, anytime you have what I think is still one of the most underrated coaches in the country, Chris Jans, I think that they're going to be in a position where it's all about the draw. We always say the matchups matter. I think for Mississippi State, maybe more so than Ole Miss, I think the matchup matters because what we know they're not great at is shooting the ball. And surprisingly, one of the most shocking stats in the SEC this year for me is how bad Mississippi State has been in defending the three. They're allowing teams shoot 37%. That's 332nd, I think, nationally. And so they got to figure some of those. Yeah, they got to figure some of those things out because guess what? You go out and get one of these, mid-major type teams you play in the first round or something like that, who just runs their offense and shoots 25 threes a game. I don't like that setup necessarily for the Bulldogs.
I agree. All right, give me a team that we're not talking about in the league. You mentioned, Florida's been up there, and I agree with you. They're trending the right way and look like they're hitting on all cylinders, going 9 deep and all that. But outside of that top four, give me a team that you really like that if you disappeared and came back Saturday of the Final Four weekend in San Antonio and someone said, Blake, this team made the Final Four, you'd be like, I am not surprised at all.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? This is going to be the team I'm going to name because in any other year, we'd have been like, all right, well, that was the expectation, wasn't it? I mean, it's Kentucky. Yeah. I think, Kentucky is absolutely the team this year where there was no one, not just in the SEC, but probably nationally, that dealt with the injury situations that Kentucky's dealt with the entire season. And yet somehow they've been able to keep it together, win so many big games. I mean, I mentioned the quad one wins earlier. I mean, Kentucky is tied for fourth with 10 now. And they played, not just that, they played 19 of them. I think that's second behind Auburn in terms of actual, total of quad one games they played this year. We have seen them time and time again rise to the occasion in these big games. They love these big games. And yes, they lost, that home one to Auburn and all that. But, for the most part, they played so well. I mean, who else has beaten Duke, Gonzaga, Louisville, Florida, Texas A&M, Tennessee twice, right? They won at Missouri the other day. They have just got so many good wins. And I think from that standpoint, to me, I'm not going to say it's an exact comparison. There are a lot of things I think that are similar about this Kentucky team and that Alabama team that made the Final Four run last year. Elite offensive team. Yes, there's a little bit to be desired on the defensive end sometimes. But, Kentucky, I think, was ranked, I want to say it was 115th or something like that in defense a month or so ago. Now they're up to in top 50 defensive team in the country. And so they've gotten a lot better on that end of the floor. And I think Mark Pope's done a fantastic job. I think when you looked at the roster coming into the season, I don't know, it didn't look like a top, team type roster. I mean, I think we picked them 8th or something like that, which made I thought was about right. And, that's kind of looking at a scenario now where if they go win the SEC tournament this week, I wouldn't be shocked. If they make the Final Four, I wouldn't be shocked because look how many great wins they have. And I feel like people are going to be a little down on them just from the record standpoint. But now they're about as healthy as they've been all season. And so I think that's going to mean something heading into these tournaments.
He is Blake Lovell on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line, SEC Basketball Insider. He's in Nashville. He's hanging out with us on 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. This is the Out of Bounds Show. All right, one more, Blake. Cal and the Hogs. They, as he said, everybody put them in the coffin, but didn't put the nails in. Are they going to make it in?
I think they're going to make it in. I think that win against Mississippi State put them in. You don't want to be in a scenario where you lose to South Carolina again, because having those two losses, in a span of 11 days would not be ideal. But I think right now they're in. And, sometimes we say too, keep in mind, you don't know what the committee's going to value when it comes to the SEC tournament. We've seen it so many times over the years where we look up and we're like, man, that should have really improved that team seeding by a line or two, and it does nothing. And so I think, though, for the bubble teams, it's got to matter. You don't want to be sitting there with potential bid stealers out there this week. So you don't want to do that with a loss. But I think if they win this game against South Carolina on Wednesday, I don't think there's any way possible you can keep them out.
And that's a dangerous team. They got players.
It is. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? We saw what South Carolina did to them, a couple weeks ago or whatever, and it's just like, I don't know. Arkansas is playing very well right now, and these are the kind of games, like I said, it's not as bad of a loss as it would be any other year, even if you were to lose this one, but I think right now you don't want to give the committee anything to work with when it comes to trying to find a way to maybe put, a North Carolina or somebody like that in ahead of these. So.
I've got 1 minute. What about your Vanderbilt Commodores?
Hey, listen, the Commodores, you said earlier, I might not go Final Four with them, but I think they're a team too, and I know they've lost back-to-back games. They are one of the best in the SEC at running their offense, and I think that could matter when you get into some of these half-court type games if you get the right matchup in the NCAA tournament, which they are absolutely in. I think they're going to stay out of Dayton. So if the Commodores, let's say, are in that 10 slot, I don't know if they want to be in that 8-9 game for all the obvious reasons, but if they wind up as a 10, you can see them beating a 7, have a chance to beat a 2. I wouldn't be surprised. Mark Bankston's done a great job. Any other year, if he didn't have what Bruce Pearl and Todd Golden, guys like that have done, he'd probably be easily your coach of the year. But yeah, he's done a really good job, and I think they're one to keep an eye on.
All right, Blake, that was great, man. Love following you on Twitter. Have a great week in Nashville. It's going to be awesome.
Appreciate it, both. Thank you.
Blake Lovell on the Out of Bounds Show, host of at 16 Southeastern, SEC basketball insider. He was our correspondent. He was at Bridgestone Arena right there. Okay, I may be exaggerating or embellishing that, but he's in Nashville, and he's awesome on Twitter following the SEC. He likes the way Florida, and they've been playing great, is looking. Auburn lost a heartbreaker to Alabama. That was a wild game. And Mississippi State crushing loss on Saturday. And I think he made a great point about you get into these half-court games, and how do you run your offensive sets? And that doesn't bode well for Mississippi State. Yet they're capable of winning games. But who's going to help Hubbard? You just give the slight edge to some of these other teams as far as what they run half-court set-wise. And good hell, that's a bad shooting team and defending the three. And yet here they are. They're going to the tournament. You tell me. The Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your auto and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. As Jake Mangum says, go local. Go with the home team. Hour number 2 coming up. Oh, we got another guest out of Lexington, Kentucky, coming up at 8:30.
WRKS Pickens Jackson.
All systems go.
Live from the Whiskey 61 Lounge inside the Bank Plus studio.
This is Out of Order.
Live in the studio.
It's the Out of Bounds Show with Lovell. Streaming live worldwide on the Out of Bounds radio app. And on your radio at ESPN 105.9.
All set? Let's go.
The Zone.
Whoa, that's what I'm talking about. Jackson's ready to rock. Rock 98.3. Did I do that right? We are the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Good morning, good morning. Welcome in. The show is brought to you by the fabulous steaks and award-winning Elijah Craig Bourbon. Kessler Prime and the Renaissance.
By the way, I'm a fan.
KesslerPrime.com to make a reservation.
By the way, I'm a fan.
Don't forget that Volteo Tequila has hit the market. Nate Dogg at Briarwood Wine and Spirits has Volteo Tequila. And, of course, Jamie Pharis at Lincoln Road. I think he was the first one in the state to get it. Not surprising, but Jamie Pharis has Volteo Tequila. Try it out. Super premium 100% blue agave, 100% additive free Volteo Tequila, Blanco Reposado. I'm not sure how many people have Cristalino right now. I did take a shot with Dak, which is kind of cool. But at the Super Bowl party a few weeks ago, super chilled, super smooth. But the Blanco and Reposado are amazing. And, I was at Scotty's in Starkville on Saturday. Yeah. I was at Scotty's. It's a wine and spirit store. It's really nice. Out on Highway 12. They have a display right in the front of Volteo Tequila. They got the Reposado out there. And they just got a private barrel pick of Elijah Craig. Isn't that crazy? They had two of our partners on the same whiskey barrel. You know how they display on whiskey barrels in wine and spirit stores? They put the whatever bottles out. They had Volteo, Reposado, which is delicious, and then they had their barrel pick, I guess Scotty's barrel pick of Elijah Craig. So that was cool too. And right now, Jamie Pharis has a barrel pick of Elijah Craig. So there's all kinds of fun stuff going on. Just wanted to give you an update there. I don't think I did that last week. We went heavy college hoops. In the first hour. We'll continue to do that. This is my favorite. I love college football from start to finish. Really, really like the NFL. College baseball is fun, especially sunshine and when you're winning weekend games. You all know about that and the march to the regionals. But it doesn't get any better than March Madness. And I hope you're planning ahead to next Thursday and Friday because you got to go ahead and figure out your work schedule. It's worked for me, so it's really worked out. But and the games tip at 11:10 a.m. next week, which is super cool. But we got the SEC basketball tournament, which is fun first. But March Madness, 11:10 a.m. next Thursday and Friday, all the way to midnight. And Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday games too, as we get into the round of 32. It's a great tournament. So many of you don't really pay attention to college basketball, and that's fine. And then the tournament gets here, and you love it, and that's wonderful too. It's been a fun year. Ole Miss and Mississippi State, believe it or not, have had good years. It's just you are in a just ruthless conference that is stacked. It's the best conference ever in the history of college basketball. That doesn't mean that one of our teams will win it. However, I fully expect one to get there, maybe two. If you get two there, that's incredible. Just depends on the path. But the Rebs and the Dogs are in, which is rare. That happened several years ago. They both got bounced on the same day, but Hallen and Kermit Jr. went on the same year. It was Kermit's first year and Hallen's, I don't remember, second or third year or something. And they both went on the same day. They played on Friday. I think MSU lost early and Ole Miss lost late, but going period is good. Mississippi State, this will be your third tournament in a row. That's incredible in this state. And again, I say this, you'll hear me say it even more because of this time of year. You just sleep on what Rick Stansberry did at Mississippi State. It's unbelievable. We just love to take our coaches that win for granted. And insane what he did with no budget. Larry Templeton never helped him. Never increased his budget on assistant coaches and so on. I remember some alums had to get together to buy the digital piece of equipment so that you could go from like the way you used to watch film, the old way, to the digital cut-ups so that it could expedite the process in between games. And so it's just, Rick did it with a couple of used Band-Aids and, whatever, an old, knee sleeve from 1983, and he won. So he signed some great players, Jamont Gordon and Derek Zimmerman and Mario Austin and Lawrence Roberts and Timmy Bowers and so on. But, we just haven't had that much. Had a little bit, but not that much March Madness success. Obviously, Mississippi State has had the unprecedented 2-year run of 2 Sweet 16s and a Final Four and an SEC basketball tournament championship in those back-to-back years in 95 and 96. And Ole Miss has had some success. Rod Barnes took them to the Sweet 16 and was that 01 or something? And that was the Provine trio. But here we are. It's going to be fun. I embrace it, love it. Get on with it. And you build around drink and food and drink, right? It's a whatever that is for you. It could be a Dr. Pepper or it could be, an ice cold Michelob Ultra. But it's fun to watch games all day and all night. We'll have buzzer beaters and we'll have games going overtime, which will be fun too. So, and we'll have our our Out of Bounds March Madness bracket. We're putting together. We will put the finishing touches on the grand prize. One of them will be a room at the Golden Moon, golf, and Philip M's. That'll be one, but we'll do something else. We may. I'm gonna wait, see how. I think we've got something pretty big coming down the chute that I'm fired up about, that we met about, and I just need to get one more confirmation on. Hey, speaking of, the text line is 601-885-3776. Would love to hear from you this morning. 601-885-3776. Who are you rooting for in the SEC tournament? Shoot us a text. Twitter X at Bo Bounds. Thank you, Elon Musk, for saving our country. My number one team is Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency. Please cut everything to the bone. Everything. Just continue to cut. When you follow that on Twitter and you see all the fluff and billions of dollars of crap that they were spending your money and my money on, it just infuriates me. It really does. Because I think you should keep your money. And those that do receive benefits, maybe we can give more and we don't have all this, administrative, bureaucratic fluff. The Key City Beer caller line, 601-707-3750. Good morning. Welcome in. We'll have Tristan Pharis, UK Insider, Big Blue Nation. They're getting fired up. Hey, they're going to take over Nashville, too. Get ready. Nashville's going to be wild. Starting tomorrow night. Back in a second. All right, we are the Out of Bounds Show, 1059 The Zone, ESPN. We're brought to you by Superior Foundation. If you need French drains, foundation repair, new driveway, or let's say your bank or restaurant needs parking lot repair, Superior.ms, Superior Foundation. Call them today. Todd Sanders, Trey Pace. Hey, Ole Miss will play the winner of South Carolina and Arkansas on Thursday at noon. Mississippi State will play Wednesday night. Wednesday night at 6 against LSU. That is not a gimme. That's not a gimme. I know they weren't good this year, but they've got some players. And so that's where we are.
I feel like we say that about LSU every year. It's every year.
Yeah.
They're not any good, but they got players.
Well, no, they were good under Will Wade. It's just Will got the recording with the FBI wiretaps.
That's so weak.
Yeah, I mean.
Who did that?
Well, I mean, Bill Self told Kansas, not only will you not fire me, you will give me a lifetime contract. Yeah. And if you fire me, you have to, regardless if it's with four calls, then you will pay me out in full. That's what you call a basketball emperor. Yeah. And there's not many of them left. Krzyzewski hung it up. Boeheim hung it up. Roy Williams hung it up. And Cal's he's kind of an emperor, but not quite on that level. But I give Cal credit for breaking out his gangster. Like Will Wade over the weekend after beating Mississippi State. And that was a heartbreaking loss for MSU. So was Texas.
Yeah.
Kind of a theme here, and I'll get into MSU and Ole Miss here in about a minute or two. But for Cal to jump on a plane and go to the NBA game and get pictures with all his players, man, he is the ultimate salesman. And he understands branding more than anybody else in college basketball. More than anybody.
Maybe college sports period, right?
Yeah, college sports period.
I mean,
you know, Lane does all he can do.
Yeah, sure.
Considering, you know, Kirby doesn't have to do that, right? I mean, you know, DeBoer and Ron Day and Sark. You know, those guys don't have to do that, but Cal is the ultimate Barnum and Bailey. Yep. You know, again, you remember when, I mean, they still do, but when the circus or the fair, I guess, still do, but not everywhere. But man, it was a big deal coming out of World War II. Nobody had any other way to entertain themselves. And so when the pop-up circus or the pop-up fair comes through or came through, you know, those were the biggest showmen in the country outside of New York, and not everybody could get there. And possibly some other spots, but Cal comes back kind of left for dead. Now they're in the mix. If they beat South Carolina on Wednesday, Blake Lovell believes they're in. I do too. And by the way, they play Ole Miss if they beat South Carolina. You get Beard and Cal at in game 1 for Ole Miss, game 2 for South Carolina. Arkansas.
Right.
If Arkansas wins. Obviously they were embarrassed a couple of weeks ago, but you know, what the hell?
Ole Miss don't win any part of that.
You don't think so?
No. I tell you, it's March, obviously. This is when you have to play your best basketball.
Right.
And they've won the past 2. And it's time, if they beat South Carolina, 3 in a row, and then they're rolling.
Rolling, baby.
Last thing you need, somebody to get hot in March.
Let's talk about Mississippi State basketball. They are an enigma. They are. We used to always talk about AK, and AK's teams were an enigma. This team this year, totally. So you have Josh Hubbard, who is a hell of a basketball player with insane basketball IQ. And then you don't have another shot maker on the team. See, even though Mississippi State swept Ole Miss, you may give Ole Miss the slight edge. It may be. Now, Mississippi State does some other things that Ole Miss can't do. But as far as guards, in running half court sets, I think you give Ole Miss the slight edge. Mississippi State's problem is how bad they are at shooting the ball and how bad they are at defending the 332nd in the country. And so when you look at that and you're talking about offensive and defensive scoring efficiency, which really drives the train, it's no wonder you've been up and down and you haven't been able to close out games at times. And then you get down. You shouldn't have gotten down by 16 on Saturday. You come storming back. That was cool. And then, look, they called a foul. It's in Arkansas, whatever. It could go either way.
Yeah.
And the guy only hits one, and you've got time to get it down the court. You don't run a play because, I was not surprised. As good as Chris Jans is, their weakness is offense and play calling on offense. Now, Kugel, because of his physicality, finally just says, I'm going to take it to the goal, which was smart. Now, don't get me wrong. We've all watched and witnessed much worse end of the – actually, that was good. Like terrible end of the game shots.
Oh, yeah.
Kugel gets in the lane, gets a good look, doesn't go in. Okay. Melendez rebounds. Point blank look, misses. Your problem is Melendez and Harris are solid. Jones and Nwoko are role players at best. And Cam Matthews without Tolu is just a different. Has he played well at times? Does he give it his all? Does he do a bunch of different things? No question. Did you notice the league figured it out the first 2 weeks of conference play? And especially after Cam dropped, what did he drop? 20-something on Kentucky? They were like, okay, they don't have anybody else down low. See, they had to guard Tolu the last couple of years. Now with Cam, they've totally shifted the way they play him, and that's been really, really tough for Cam. I think you got to bring your floor up in the offseason. What I mean by that is you've got to have better players than Melendez, Harris, Nwoko, and Sean Jones. I don't count Warren. He's a 4-minute guy. 4-minute a game guy so that Hub can get 1 minute before either the 8 or 4-minute timeout. Y'all see what Jans is doing. He's trying to get Hub out of the game before you have one of those 8. You have timeouts at 16, 12, 8, and 4. So they're trying to get him 1 or 2 minutes prior to the 8-minute or 4-minute timeout. I'm not saying that's always going to work because it depends on what's going on in the game. But that's where you are. And if the postseason is driven by half-court sets, this isn't really how you're built. You were built like that, actually, a little bit more under Tolu and DJ Jeffries on the perimeter, even though you couldn't shoot, other than Hub. So, am I missing anybody? No. And then Padula, I love that Hub and Padula can accelerate and decelerate with the basketball. And that is such a lost art, I think, but also an asset in college. In the NBA, they can do all sorts of things. But in college basketball, the way that Hub and Padula can run the team. But Ole Miss, even though they got swept by Mississippi State, you just get the sense they got the slight edge. Well, they do with perimeter defense and perimeter scoring. And if that's what this thing's going to come down to, something's going to have to flip for the Dogs. But can it really at this point? And yet I still think even though you're an enigma, I think you can maybe win a game or two. But I thought Blake Lovell made a great point. If you get matched up with a mid-major who can shoot it, curtains. Tristan Pharis, Big Blue Nation, coming up next. Oh, man. Your SEC Insider hit this morning is brought to you by the amazing food at Aplos and the Renaissance and Aplos in Highland Village. From gyros and pizzas to pita mas and hummus, it's all at Aplos. Dining in, takeout, or catering, Aplos Highland Village and Aplos in the Renaissance. Jackson Meadows got him a gyro over the weekend. He's feeling some Parmesan fries. He's feeling right this morning on a Monday. I think March Madness starts this week, but I know the official tournament's next week, but it's super exciting to have the big tourney, and that is the SEC basketball tournament in Nashville, in Bridgestone Arena. Mississippi State will play Wednesday against LSU at 6, and Ole Miss will play Thursday, the winner of Arkansas and South Carolina at noon. And we want to bring in SEC Basketball Insider, Kentucky Hoops Insider, founder of Kentucky Insider, and editor of ASEA Blue. He is Tristan Pharis on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. I would have to believe that things are going well up there with Big Blue Nation in Bourbon Country with the way that y'all played as of late. Tristan?
Yeah, it got a little testy there late January, early February, but the last week has definitely gave Big Blue Nation some confidence going into March. You pretty much demolish LSU, and then you go and beat a really good offensive Missouri team on the road in a good environment. So pretty good week heading into the postseason.
So are you buying, so it took a while, and that's fine. I mean, you have a first-year coach, and you have the portal, which is, mayhem. And so when you get a new coach and you got to do the whole thing over again, it's like Cal and the Hogs. It took them a little while. And so are you buying totally now, or do you need to see a little bit more? Where are you in this journey?
Now, personally, Mark Pope has definitely exceeded year one expectations for 99% of the Kentucky fan base. Now, there's always the small percentage that does have outlandish expectations. But, I mean, you beat all of your big rivals. You beat Duke. You beat Tennessee. You swept Tennessee, not just beat them. You beat Louisville. So you beat everybody that you really, really wanted to beat in your first season. And then you go out and you get 8 top 15 wins, the most in program history, tied for the most in NCAA history. So now there are some lacking losses there, some baffling ones to Ohio State, and Georgia, Ole Miss blowout. So there's some baffling losses in there, but for the most part, it's good. Now, personally, the way I look at it is year one definitely a success. Now you measure what happened in the postseason, but the regular season has definitely been a success. I think the real test for Pope comes next year, because that'll be really the first roster in terms of he's had a year to build it. So he went out and got some freshmen and see how he can adapt those into his offensive system, which is really intricate. And you'll hear a lot of coaches say that. But then he'll also have a year under his belt to look what I did with this group of transfers that I had put together in just a few weeks, and try to go get some really top names this season.
Okay. Tristan Pharis, Big Blue Nation Insider, and they're all going crazy. They'll take over Nashville. I mean, I can remember that as a kid, watching Big Blue Nation take over SEC basketball tournaments, and they'll do it this weekend. But it's interesting you say that. So for 99% of your fan base, Mark Pope, first-year head coach for Kentucky, has exceeded your fan base's expectations. However, and you were kind of pointing towards next year. However, you've got a team that could end up in the Final Four, don't you?
I feel like, don't get me wrong, they definitely could. That they've shown that they have the ability to exceed the expectations. They're really resilient. When you count them out, that's when they play their best. But I think without Jackson Robinson, now I know several players have stepped up. The freshmen have started to play better, but to assume or kind of expect the Final Four would be a little outlandish, I think. But I think a Sweet 16 is probably where most people feel like is the expectation is this year, which I think just because they've played so well, they've kind of played themselves into those raised expectations. But yeah, March is the test. So if you go out and lose round one, this season's been a failure. If you make it to the second round, I think most people will be very happy with that. I think even if you get a win, which is something Kentucky's not had in a couple of years, a lot of postseason success. Even if you just get a win, I think most people will be happy.
Does it make you mad that Cal and the Hogs look like they've turned it around, and if they win on Wednesday, they're in, or it looks like they're in?
I'm not one of those that really left with a hatred of Cal. I'll always respect Cal for what he did at Kentucky on and off the court. He raised millions of dollars, impacted the community, and he brought us a national championship. Yeah, have the last few years sucked for sure. And I think it was just kind of a mutual, everybody got better from it. He kind of got rid of the stress, and you kind of see him and a couple guys he took with him flourishing here at the end of this season. And then Kentucky were still a 3 seed. It worked out for both sides. But February 1st sucked for sure. And hopefully we don't have that circus.
Oh, what was that like?
And
tell me what that was like on the boards and on Sports Talk Radio. When y'all were up in the first half by, I think, double digits, Tristan. And then Cal and the Hogs beat y'all in Lexington. Did you think at that night, did you think, oh no, Mark Pope could lose control of this? I mean, what was your reaction, and what was the fan base's reaction the next 48 hours when y'all lost to Cal and the Hogs?
Yeah, I don't think there was a lot of big picture worry. I think it was just in the moment what that meant. Now, if you look from where I looked at it, that game meant more to anybody else on the floor than Cal and the 3 players that left Kentucky. Those 4 guys, it meant more to anyone else, just because they know what it was like to be here at Kentucky. They know what it was like to leave, and they've kind of seen the backlash since they've left. And now I think a lot of that backlash is from the minority of the fan base, but they still felt it. So those guys came in motivated, and they played like it. But yeah, big picture wise, there wasn't a lot of worry. It was just like, out of all the games, like, you lost to the guy that has kind of given Kentucky some heartache the last few years. Out of all the games you had to lose, at home especially, that was one that a lot of people didn't want to. But I think the way they rattled off the next few weeks, obviously I think they bounced back and beat Tennessee 10 days later. That kind of helped ease the pain. So just kind of they played their way back out of it. I don't think many people talk about it much anymore just because they don't want to. But yeah, definitely a circus pregame, a circus of a pregame atmosphere, and a pretty bad loss, especially what I think at that time they'd only won 1 or 2 games in the SEC.
Right.
But I think them also playing better has helped ease that as well, because they're going to end up a tournament team most likely.
Kentucky Wildcat insider Tristan Pharis hanging out with us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Mark Pope and the Cats have turned this thing around, and they could be a dangerous, dangerous draw in March Madness. And as Tristan said, Pope was able – what does that say about Mark Pope, that he was able to keep everything together? Because that could have derailed your season after Cal and the Hogs, who were not playing well, come in and beat you. What does that say about Mark Pope, your new coach for the Kentucky Wildcats?
I think Mark Pope, what I like about him, he's very positive. So even now, I think people have seen it when Kentucky played Auburn a few weeks ago, kind of like the pregame speech. They kind of compared Mark Pope, and there was just a few claps, and they compared it to Bruce Pearl, who had players jumping on him right before the game. It's just kind of a different level of intensity. Now, that's not to say Mark Pope doesn't get intense. He kind of picks and chooses his moments. But throughout both really high times, really low times, he's always positive. Before or after losses, or before or after games, after losses, that positivity never wavers. And I think his team feels that. So even when they lose to Ole Miss by 20 points and never look competitive, or even when they lose to Auburn the weekend before last and looking competitive, then when they lose that Arkansas game, they always find a way to bounce back, just because that positivity never wavers. And I think that's a big part of his coaching style, and his players really seem to respond to it really well.
Okay. Does it bother you when Cal goes to NBA games and takes pictures with Kentucky players?
Personally, no. most of those guys, with the exception of a few, have pledged their allegiance to Kentucky. They went to school at Kentucky. There are a couple Cal guys. The Reed Shepherd controversy a few weeks ago was something, but those guys are.
Oh, what happened with that? I didn't see it. Talk to me.
Oh, so Reed Shepherd, he had a Arkansas shirt with Kentucky shorts on before the Arkansas-Kentucky game.
Oh, dude, you can't do that?
Yeah. I don't know who was advising him on
He
that,
misread the room, especially with his father playing at UK too. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. And I think what a lot of people liked is obviously Arkansas won that game, but what a lot of people didn't like is it was the Arkansas top. So Arkansas was able to tweet Arkansas on top after that game, which made it even worse. So even if he would have just kind of wore the Kentucky shirt, Arkansas shorts, I don't think the lash back would have been as bad. But yeah, you can't. It wasn't just his dad played at Kentucky; he was roommates with Mark Pope at Kentucky. So it kind of felt like a backslap to Kentucky.
Wow.
Yeah. It
Man.
was. It was very intense for a few days. I have kind of. What he did for Kentucky last year was I'm appeased. I'm okay with it. But a lot of people aren't, and they're still pretty hurt by it.
Damn. Okay, I did not, dude. You gotta read the room better than that. He's a fantastic player. He broke our heart last year with that shot in the hump when he and Hubbard went on that, one-on-one against each other the last few minutes of the game as true freshmen. Some of the best basketball I've ever seen in my life from 18 or 19-year-olds. But dude, you can't wear Arkansas. You can't wear Arkansas swag, Tristan. I mean, you can't.
Nope.
Your family bleeds blue. I mean,
yeah, I get it for a lot of those players, but to be born and raised in Kentucky, your mom and dad played at Kentucky, your dad was roommates with the current coach. It's just, not great advice to him.
I would have loved to have been able to see the text exchange, after the game. But man, Cal's got he's like he hypnotizes people. He's got such a magnetic personality that, and he's the best salesman in the history of college basketball and brand builder, individually. In of course, Kentucky's brand was already built, but then Cal had his own brand, which is incredible that he was actually able to get out of that shadow. That's how big he is. All right. Who do you think the best, Auburn's been kind of start to finish, but Florida's playing out of their minds. Which team do you like the best right now in the SEC?
It's really hard to pick against Auburn just because they've lost 3 games. or I think it was 3 games, maybe 4, and they've all been to top 5, top 10 teams. So the tear they've been on this year has been crazy. But at the same time, that's a lot of those players were on the same team last year. They got upset in the tournament. So there's some kind of, are they built to make a run? Because there's always a 1 seed that gets upset early. But I really like you alluded to Florida. I really like Florida. I think 1 through 7 or 8, they just brought an all SEC center back, which is nice to add at the end of the season for depth purposes. But I really like Florida. And then Alabama always has one of the best offenses. It just comes down to, can they play defense consistently for a stretch of games here down late. So, but just the strength of the SEC is crazy. I think if you looked at the latest bracketology, they have 6 or 7 teams in the top 16. So I think it's just the SEC hopefully can go pretty far in March and kind of stretch their muscles a little bit more.
All right. Who are you going to go down to Nashville, or are you going to watch it on TV?
I'm going down to Nashville. I'm glad we at least didn't have to play on Wednesday night. I'm hoping for chaos on Wednesday night. I'm just glad Kentucky's not a part of it.
All right. So Kentucky pulls the winner of Oklahoma and Georgia. And God knows
Correct.
what time that game will tip off. It's going to be late.
That's the only thing about Kentucky's draw I do not like, because the whole time they'll have the late game.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the Thursday night, I think it's scheduled for 9:30 Central or 8:30 Central. So I'm sure we'll be playing at 9:30 Central.
That's right. That's right, man. That game's going to be now. TV loves y'all late in the night. I think late in the evening, but because y'all are the biggest draw still. I tell you what, man. I still think Bama is filthy, and just Missouri's one that's out there too. It's just so many good teams. Damn, I don't know what.
I mean, you got teams like Oklahoma and Georgia that have top 10, top 15 picks, and they're still trying to fight their way comfortably into the tournament.
I know. And Texas has a top 8 lottery pick. And
it's nothing like I've ever seen in the SEC.
No. All right, buddy. Well, look, man, we're going to do this again during March Madness, and we appreciate you, Tristan. Thanks, dude. Have fun in Nashville.
Sounds good, Bo. I appreciate you having me on. See you guys.
Tristan Pharis, Big Blue Nation insider. Mark Pope gets embarrassed at home by Cal and the Hogs and then turns it around. And that could have been a moment where things start to unravel. Right? And
should have.
Instead, they, Ole Miss had embarrassed them at home at Ole Miss.
Right.
And Cal and the Hogs come in. They hadn't gotten rolling yet. And he makes a good point. The 3 transfers wanted it. Cal wanted it like crazy. But Arkansas they're down early. And then they come storming back and win. And I don't know what he did, but give Pope credit, getting his team back together the next day, getting in, explaining to him, hey, here's what we did wrong. Here's what we can do. Boom, we got to keep rolling. And I do like the positivity.
Yeah.
I sometimes think that Jans suffocates the moment too much. And Chris is very, very talented. But, and look, he said some things about this team that were unreal. I mean, you could tell how emotional he was last week when they lost to Texas. And knowing that, golly, how many games has Cam Matthews been in Starkville? But I think it's hard to not be who you are, but I don't know. We'll see. How many days off? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday? A lot of Wednesday. But everybody's got the same turnaround. Just depends on when you're playing in the tournament. LSU's not a gimme. Y'all saw Mississippi State pulled away and beat them by double digits at home. And you saw that Ole Miss was down by like 22 to them and had to hit a buzzer beater to beat them in Baton Rouge. So they've proven at times that they could play. And it's just not. They've got some players. They're not a great team by any stretch, but they've got some dudes. They trip over dudes in every sport.
Right.
Even when football, basketball, baseball, even when they're down, whatever down is. Well, they've been down in football, obviously, and they're down in basketball this year. We'll see. I don't want to sound like I'm just totally down on the Mississippi State basketball team. I'm not.
Well,
but because they've done some good things, and again, they've won these road games that are at home. It was their problem.
Right.
I mean, they went to Ole Miss, to Georgia, to Vanderbilt. They're all going to the tournament. They went to Memphis. Memphis is going to the tournament. They went out to Arizona and got a good win. But it just, I'm looking here at their, by the metrics, according to Ken Palm, their offense is top 50 in the nation. Their defense falls outside the top 150.
That is what?
And losing DJ Jeffries and Tolu Smith, and again, DJ 6'7" on the perimeter, either the best or top 5 perimeter defender in the country last year. And Tolu was a top 5 big man on defense. I mean, there's no doubt about that. What that allowed Jans to do with the other guys that were playing at that time, whoever was playing, you could cheat on the perimeter.
Yeah.
You could, because you knew if the guy backdoored you, who was there? Tolu. At almost 7 feet.
Yeah.
And then you put DJ on their best shooter. Hey, you did. and it just you're a different team. And Melendez and Harris are nice players, and then the others are role players in Nwoko and Jones. Murphy, if you'll have to bid your tail off on him, but Keyshawn Murphy is good, and he could be a stud next year because he finally played a whole year this year for the first time in years. And he's been able to drop 18 and 19 and 20 at times. You know, he's got that skill set that you want. He can play the mid-range game, and he can play at the rim. Gains 10 pounds, and you bring Hub back, you got something. But you got to go get a shot maker, a point guard, and a big man. So you do not have a big man. Actually, LSU's got some length. You know, so that's something to keep an eye on Wednesday at 6:00 when you're having a cold beer or a lemonade, as far as what that looks like. Now, they may have a chip on their shoulder now that they went back-to-back games. Because don't get me wrong, you got some winners on this team. Hub, Cam, you know, those guys have won games and been to tournaments and stuff like that. So I'm not ready to count them out, but by any stretch. But, man, outside the top 150 in the country in defense and 332nd in perimeter defense, it's not a recipe for success. You got to find something. I can tell Kugel has played better. See, like you've lost this past week. Of course, both games you could have won. Right. One win in overtime against Texas. Arkansas obviously hit a free throw with 11 seconds left. So I do. The Kugel thing, he disappeared for a long stretch. He is playing better, and it looks like they've just told him you're playing.
Yeah.
You know, you did this whole thing where you disappeared for 4 weeks, and that blank is over. I still think he's the X factor. You know, I've talked about Brakefield and Kugel, but you don't ever know which Kugel is going to show up, or Brakefield, but definitely Kugel. And you took a chance on Clary, and it absolutely blew up in your face. Yeah. He never played, basically. So that's on the staff. We are the Out of Bounds Show. We're brought to you by RPT and Rick's Pro Truck. Have you got a Jeep or a truck or an SUV, whether it's spraying bed liners or lift kits or tires and wheels, Weather Tech floor guards, Rick's Pro Truck, 3 locations. RPT Trucks live here. Hour number 3 coming up.
WRKS Pickens Jackson.
All systems go.
Live from the Whiskey 61 Lounge inside the Bank Plus studio.
This is Out of Order.
Live in the studio.
It's the Out of Bounds Show with Lovell. Streaming live worldwide on the Out of Bounds radio app. And on your radio at ESPN 105.9.
All set? Let's go.
The Zone.
Man, what a weekend. We have chaos in front of us with the conference tournaments and March Madness. We are the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. We had two SEC basketball insiders on the show. Blake Lovell from Nashville. He's awesome on Twitter. And Tristan Pharis, Big Blue Nation insider, too. All of that will be on Apple Podcast and Spotify shortly. Search Out of Bounds with Bo Bounds on whichever platform you like the best. Apple Podcast or Spotify, search Out of Bounds with Bo Bounds. Would love for you to hit the subscribe button. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. I'm your host, Bo Bounds. Jackson Meadows with me. Meadows, you going to have to break out some high tops? Are you wearing high tops right now?
Nah, not right now. But
Okay.
they're never up, so I never have to break them out.
All right, good.
I don't retire them for the summer or whatnot.
How many pairs of Nikes do you have?
We're pushing about 77, I think was the last count.
77 pairs of Nikes.
Nikes.
It's what every man needs.
Yeah,
I mean, right?
pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a look good, feel good, play good deal.
Yeah.
It's on you.
How much did those cost you on average per pair of sneakers?
A couple hundred. Let's say two, maybe 150. Yeah, I mean, as long as you don't get them on resale, as long as you get them for retail, you're good.
Okay.
And getting them for retail is quite a difficult deal. You got to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody.
So I just split the difference at $175. So you've got $13,475 in those shoes.
That's probably. That's really
Starting.
low.
When did you start buying them?
4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago.
Okay.
Something like that.
So if you'd put all that in Bitcoin, how would you be?
Shoot. 13K Bitcoin. Back then, it would have been like probably less than 20K a piece, maybe 8 or 9. Oh my gosh. It'd have done a lot better.
Okay.
I wouldn't have been able to look good.
That's right. It's about looking good. You just nailed it. The Pearl River Resort text line is 601-885-3776. Twitter X at Bo Bounds. Thank you, Elon Musk, for saving our country from bankruptcy. They're just going to drive it straight off the damn cliff. And then the Key City, where was I that had a Mississippi Queen? I mean, they've got them everywhere, but I was somewhere recently. Oh, I went by Mudbugs. Yeah. The Key City Beer caller line, 601-707-3750. I went by Mudbugs on Sunday. Yeah. What was yesterday? Very cool. Hey, you know what show I watched last night? Ooh. Joe Buck has a show, and he brings on cool guests. He brought on John Smoltz. And Smoltz told a lot of his life story about growing up in Lansing, Michigan. And he was drafted by the Tigers, and he was 5-11 in the minor leagues, and the Tigers traded him. And he said he thought when he talked to him that they were joking. So he's 5-11 in minor league baseball. This is John Smoltz.
Right.
And things are not going well. And they trade him to the Braves. And he gets 2 pieces of paper. This is before cell phones. He gets 2 pieces of paper. This is like 88, 87. I don't remember. And blah, 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 and he calls, I think, his agent first, and then he calls his dad, and they're like, he grew up a Tiger, obviously, Michigan, right? And so the Detroit Tigers were his team. Yeah. And Lou Whitaker and Alan Trammell, along with Jack Morris. Jack Morris was his childhood hero. And then he goes to the Braves. Yeah. And he gets under Leo Mazzoni. And he said that Leo Mazzoni and Bobby Cox, I'm stating the obvious now, so he was not in a good spot. He didn't feel good about what he was doing, didn't feel good about his pitching, his approach, all of that. And Mazzoni said, why don't you just, the 57 things that they're trying to tell you to do, why don't you just not do that? Why don't you just throw naturally as an athlete? Yeah. And he did that, and he was up in the majors a year later. Wow. It's a hell of a interview on, I don't know if it was on Netflix or YouTube. I can't remember where I was, but it was good.
I'd love to hear, like, obviously, like, we love hearing from Maddox and Smoltz and people like that, seeing docs, especially years later. I want to see one with Leo.
Well, he was in Maddox's documentary.
Right. But he
was great.
I mean, that dude, first off, it's a Hall of Fame. Well, he should be.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he's in the Pro Baseball Hall of Fame. Should be, if he's not. One of the best assistant coaches probably ever.
Oh, he's one of the best pitching coaches in the history of Major League Baseball.
Ever. And to see, to work with the people he got to work with, I'd love to hear some of those stories. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he, him and old John, didn't he have John Rocker?
He did have John Rocker.
I love John Rocker. He wasn't good.
But, look, I was a huge Smoltz, Maddox Glavine, and Chipper. That was so much fun. He talked about, losing early, and oh man. And then the 94 season got canceled because of the strike. That's just brutal. And then they eventually win it in 95. Crazy. And I also watched the Red Sox 3-part series on them. What's going on? Oh, man, there's gremlins all around us. So we'll try this again to end this segment. The show is brought to you by Martin's in Livingston. What a great place to watch the SEC basketball tournament with all the TVs that they have at Martin's in Livingston and the po' boys and the delicious appetizers.